Thank you for joining, and welcome to Learning Zwift. We all want to go to the front and blast out a ton of watts. We see videos from the Tour de France of the big name squad setting a high tempo, stringing out the peloton, and watching riders drop one by one. Our thought is, I'm going to make my competitors hurt. But in reality, for 95% of us, we are not strong enough to break apart the race. There are certainly situations where it makes sense to put out more watts than your competitors, but for the most part, being at the front of the pack leads to spending a lot of energy while our competitors enjoy the draft. So are you wasting energy in your races? Let's dive in and discuss ways to avoid wasting watts in your Zwift races. Number 1. One of the most important things you can do to save watts is minimize the time you spend at the front of the pack. On flat roads, if you're at the front of the pack, you get no benefit from drafting. Even if you're in second position, your ride is only 22% easier than the rider in front of you. When you're in third position or lower is where you really get a benefit. As third position, the drafting benefit increases to about 30%. And anything beyond this is approximately 33%. Well, it's great to know the power savings you get from being in the draft. It can sometimes be difficult to master staying in the right spot. As races are dynamic, riders by you are always fighting for the best position. This means you will often find yourself moving back and forth within the peloton. One little game I play while racing is to see how long I can go with never touching the very front of the race. When you hit the front, you probably notice you must put out more effort to stay there. This in turn causes you to lose speed and fall to the back of the pack. Doing this once in a while is okay, but doing it multiple times throughout a race adds up, as you're consistently spiking your power and then dropping your watts. The most efficient way to ride is to try and find the tempo of the group and set a consistent pace. Practice this and you may just find you have more energy left at the end of the race. Number 2. Another key way to reduce the amount of watts you waste is to let other riders close down gaps. I'm sure you have been in a race where one or two riders try and form a breakaway, and it can be tempting when you see riders get a 3 or 4 second gap and think you have to crank up the power to bring it back. If you are like me and not the strongest rider in the group, the reality is that someone else has more to lose by the breakaway getting away than you do. Why? Because most races I enter, there are better sprinters or climbers in the race. If I decide to spend energy now chasing a gap back, it will negatively impact me later on. Instead, let these other stronger riders pull to the front and reel the breakaway in. Chances are, you will still need to put out decent power, but the group will likely reform and you will have more energy left than the big names in the field. While waiting for others to pull back the breakaway may result in no one working and it getting away, I always tell myself, if those two riders are strong enough to hold off the peloton for the remainder of the race, I likely would not have beat them in a final sprint or climb anyway. So effectively, you are not losing any places by letting them get away. Number 3. Remember, you are never going to be perfectly efficient in a race. However, my goal is to continuously improve my ability to save watts. The simplest and quickest way to check this is by checking the normalized power on Zwift Power after each race. In this video, we won't get too much into normalized power, as it is a complex formula. But what you need to know is that normalized power basically takes into account any variance between the steady coasting efforts and spiking power efforts, such as on short kicking climbs. It looks at the fact that a race will have varying efforts from steady power to short 10-second bursts of power. The closer your normalized power is to your average power, the better. Each race will vary, but if you are able to have a smaller variance or less of this bar filled up than other riders in your race, you are generally being more efficient. However, if you see that your bar is way higher than other riders, try and think if there were certain points in the race where you did unnecessary power. Were you constantly churning through to the front? Maybe you put in an extra acceleration just before a downhill. Although there are more advanced ways to measure efficiency, such as W-balance, I find that checking normalized power compared to competitors is the simplest and easiest way to get a general sense. Try checking this over your next few races and see if you feel like you had more left in the tank for the final push after improving this metric. Number 4. So what is the formula for Zwift to figure out your draft? Well, it's the following formula. P equals 1/2 watts times your CDA. Whoa. That's too complicated for purposes of this video. What you need to know is the drafting dynamics in the simplest terms means having another rider in front of you to block off the virtual wind and make your job easier. In fact, Zwift gives you an ever so slight indication if you're in the draft. If you're in a rider's draft, your avatar will sit up, except when using the Tron button. Although this is a visual indication, you can just keep in mind if you're behind another rider, you're getting a drafting bonus. However, with the recent introduction of Pack Dynamics 4.1, the drafting bonus you may be used to from last season has changed. The new Pack Dynamics makes for a more real-life feel, whereby you don't simply pass through another avatar. More often than not, you will stick on someone's wheel. From the research I have done, you need to do about 50 more watts than the person in front of you in order to pass them. This means that with the new pack dynamics, riders are often doing more watts than they need to stay in the same pack position. This is because you could reduce your watts by up to 50 and still stay in the same spot. Look at this video here. I am pushing big watts, but not moving up. In reality, I could reduce my watts by probably about 20 or 30 and have the same result, but be much more well rested. Obviously, when racing, the bunch is dynamic, and riders near you will be upping or reducing their watts, so the 50 watt estimate is not perfect. But just keep this in mind next time you want to be more efficient in your race. Number 5. On flat roads, the sheer amount of watts you put out is more important than your watts per kilogram. This is why in team time trials, the teams with bigger guys who put out more raw watts typically go faster, because there's no factor of gravity pulling the heavier weight back down a hill. However, these flat sections are where you should think about conserving watts. Why? Because you get a large drafting benefit, as we detailed before. Because you get the drafting benefit most on flat roads, I think of these sections as recovery portions of the race, much like downhill. Sure, there are times you may have to work hard on the flat, but for the most part, it's generally easier. Next race, try and use this as your recovery period. Is there a big climb coming up? Maybe Leith Hill is just ahead. If it is, just think about how much easier it will be with fresh legs compared to if you went to the front and took some pulls. Try and lower your heart rate so you don't start the big climb near the red zone. Number 6. In conclusion, the best time to save watts is on the flat sections of the course, and the optimal time to use your watts is on the big climbs or key sprints. Overall, keep focusing on improving your efficiency one race at a time. You can check out your power numbers and compare to how you felt during the race. It may just help you get a win in your next race. Thank you for joining, and remember, have fun riding.